everyone. Welcome to the Essex County Branch of Ontario Ancestors February webinar for 2021. It's nice that we are experiencing warmer weather now, and being the most southern of the counties in Ontario, we expect that our spring weather is just around the corner. My name is Linda Urquhart, and I'm the Research and Library Coordinator for the branch. And I'm just going to turn my video off so that I'm not going to distract anybody, or I'll just make it a little thing. Okay. Oh, my video isn't moving. Kim, can you figure out why is my video not moving? Like
I've turned your video off.
No, my PowerPoint isn't moving.
Oh, look down in your bottom left-hand corner. There should be very faint arrow keys.
Wow, I can't see them.
They're very faint. It's hard to say with your
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. We just wanted to remind everybody about these. Oh, I'm too far up now. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. We just wanted to remind everyone about these sites. The Ontario Ancestors website has many resources available, and I thought I would take a few minutes to discuss some of these resources that you may or may not be familiar with. You can find them under other databases. The Huguenot collection contains applications from Huguenot descendants made to the Huguenot Society, as well as files containing brief family histories. The collection contains 1,050 individual files and a total of 4,489 digitized records. You can search for a name on this database. The Ontario Name Index, also known as TONY, this database shows what resources contain your ancestor's name. Some of these resources are small snippets of information that you can order as pay-per-view. The Upper Canada Land Petitions Index gives you the microfilm locations of your ancestors' petitions, where you can access more than 82,000 references to individuals who lived in present-day Ontario between 1783 and 1865. An index to the family magazines can be used to determine if your ancestor was mentioned in one of its publications. As a member of Ontario Ancestors, you have access to all the family magazines. The Canadian Genealogist magazine published 38 quarterly issues from 1979 to 1988, containing Canadian genealogical data from elsewhere than Central Canada. All are available for download to everyone. The Strays Index identifies people who are recorded in an event that took place somewhere other than their place of origin. To search this database, you must be a member of Ontario Ancestors. Church photo collection, you are encouraged to contribute as many churches as you wish and may contribute up to 5 images for each church, together with the church name, address, and other relevant information on the church photo uploader. The Ontario Locator Database shows every municipality in Ontario, city, town, village, township, regional municipality, and gives you the name of their county and the Ontario Ancestors branch where the municipality is located. These are just a few of the resources available to you, and I would encourage everyone to spend time at the Ontario Ancestors website to discover for yourself what the website offers. The Essex branch website has indexes to our publications, as well as the members' online library and links to the Essex Marketplace. We will be having a virtual tour of our website in the April webinar. The YouTube channel has the past recordings of our branch meetings, and the Facebook group and Twitter allow you to meet other family researchers in the area, and you can often get assistance from the members of these groups to solve your own research problems. Please save the date, June 4th to the 6th, for the 2021 Ontario Ancestors Conference, My Roots, Your Roots, Our Ontario Roots. Registration begins on April the 1st. Our next presentation on April the 9th at 7 p.m. will be a virtual tour of the Essex Branch Collection at the Windsor Public Library Local Histories Branch and the Essex Branch website. Tonight's presentation is entitled Ancestry in Amherstburg and McGregor, Resources at the Marsh Historical Collection. Just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel as soon as possible. Please direct any questions you may have in the chat box to me, Linda Urquhart, and they will be discussed after the presentation. Also in the chat box, I will be uploading a handout for you to download. And I just thought I'd introduce you to the presenters for tonight. Meg Reiner was born and raised in Amherstburg. She graduated from Carleton University with an honors bachelor's degree in history and theory of architecture. She went on to study cultural heritage conservation at Fleming College. Meg has been the collections coordinator at the Marsh Historical Collection Society since 2016, and she also sits on the board of Bellevue Conservancy. She considers herself very lucky to work in the local history field and welcomes any chance to do some research. Nancy Brown's interest in local history started in 1979 at the McGregor branch of the Essex County Library, where she was the library supervisor. In 2003, with the help of the Marsh Historical Collection, Nancy and other parishioners of St. Clement's Roman Catholic Church organized a celebration of the parish's 100th anniversary, where she shared a slide presentation featuring a collection of photos that she was able to procure from parishioners of the good old days, along with information on how the village grew from being a dense forest to a very vibrant and populated area of Essex County. In 2018, with the helpful guidance of the staff at the Marsh Collection, she was able to put together a detailed presentation from Volume 1 of the McGregor News, 1875 to 1900, the first 25 years, a compilation of weekly articles from the Amherstburg Echo. Windsor and Essex County historical information is also one of her interests in the preservation of the past. And with that, I will turn things over to Meg.
Okay. Hello. Thank you to the Ontario Ancestors for inviting us to speak tonight. I'll start with a brief introduction into what the Marsh Collection Society is. So the Marsh Collection Society was founded in 1983 by John Marsh and his sister Helen Marsh. Their parents, Arthur and Bessie, moved to Amherstburg from Essex in 1900 when Arthur joined the Amherstburg Echo newspaper as secretary-treasurer. He was later joined in the business by his son and daughter, who continued to operate the Echo until 1981. While Arthur Marsh was at the helm of the Echo, he wisely maintained files on historical events in and around Essex County. This collection, called the Echo Morgue, eventually became the centerpiece of what is known today as the Marsh Historical Collection. The family desired that a facility to house the materials not be opened until after their deaths. On October 12, 1994, Eleanor Geniak and Jennifer McLeod officially opened the Marsh Collection Society office on Dalhousie Street. The office relocated to 80 Richmond in 2017. Our mandate is to collect, preserve, and encourage research into the heritage of Amherstburg and the Lower Detroit River District. So for anyone unfamiliar with the area, here's a map showing Amherstburg in 1881. Prior to amalgamation in 1998, the town of Amherstburg was bordered on the north by the township of Anderton and on the south by the township of Malden. These townships now fall within the footprint of Amherstburg, and both are within our scope. So Amherstburg started as a garrison town. The British established a military post at Amherstburg following the evacuation of Detroit in 1796. This site was chosen because of its location on the lower Detroit River across from Bois Blanc Island. Access to the channel from Lake Erie could be controlled from this strategic defense position. The town was laid out adjacent to the fort on the south side. In this initial period, the town was occupied by military personnel, merchants, fur traders, and men employed at the King's Naval Yard, many of whom were loyalists and former residents of Detroit. In 1996, the Amherstburg Bicentennial Book Committee published a 2-volume set called Amherstburg, the New Town on the Garrison Grounds, and this is a great resource for local history and genealogy. As described in the introduction to the book, some families have been here since the town put down its roots in 1796. Others arrived in the many waves of immigration that pepper Amherstburg's history, each subtly changing the cultural landscape of the community. So let's take a look at some of who these early residents were. These statistics on the screen were published in the newspaper in 1882, and the information comes from the 1881 census. It gives us an idea of what the demographics were like by that time. As you can see, in the town proper, the majority of the population is still French and English, but by this point, the majority were born in Ontario. The stats also showed a large Irish population. In 1851, nearing the end of the military phase in Amherstburg, approximately 82 retired British soldiers and their families arrived in Amherstburg. This totaled approximately 350 people and accounted for 10% of the population. This was part of a scheme proposed in response to the high rate of desertion at Fort Malden. Retired soldiers would replace the regiments and take on light military duty at the fort. 272 people on the census are identified as being of African origin. Black settlement in this area predated the establishment of the town in 1796. While some Blacks were brought here as enslaved persons by town people, others freely came to Amherstburg. Many freedom seekers chose to locate in Amherstburg, which was situated at a narrow juncture on the Canada-US border, making it an easy crossing point. Dr. Lorene Bridgen-Lenny gave an informative presentation last month that covered the resources available for researching Black families in Essex County. And if you missed it, you can watch the recording on the Essex Branch YouTube channel. Definitely worth a watch. If we move over to Anderton Township, you can see that in 1881, 68 residents are recorded as being of Indian origin. In the early years, to the north of Amherstburg were the unceded lands of the Wyandot people, known as the Huron Reserve. Nancy will talk a bit about why so few Wyandot remained in the area by 1881. We also see a large Roman Catholic population due to French settlements in River Canard and in McGregor. In Malden, the first permanent settlement dates to 1784, when officers and interpreters of the British Indian Department were granted land by the Indigenous people. By the time the census was taken in 1881, the main groups in Malden were immigrants from the British Isles, descendants of freedom seekers, and Native Canadians of French ancestry. So, where can you go to learn more about ancestry in this area? Our office is located downtown Amherstburg. Although we are not currently open to the public because of COVID, when we are able to open again, visitors are welcome to access the collection for research Tuesday to Friday from 10 until 4. Admission is free, but donations are welcome. And in the meantime, we are available for inquiries by phone and email. I'll briefly go over the resources available that we have, and these are included with a bit more detail on the handout. We have much more than what I'll cover, but I just wanted to focus on those specific to Amherstburg. So one of our main resources for information is the Amherstburg Echo. And this paper is now available online through Our Digital World, but we also have copies on microfilm. So if you have issues that are difficult to read online or the years that are missing, you can contact us and we can pull those up for you. We also have the birth, marriage, and death notice indexes that were done by the Ontario ancestors in our library. So you can consult the index and then pull up the original notice or obituary on our microfilm. There are other other newspapers that we consult when we're looking into Amherstburg people. So I've listed some here that are also available at our digital world. There are some very early Amherstburg papers available through SWOTA publications, the Amherstburg Courier, Maple Leaf, and Observer. And then I've also listed other newspapers that we have here on microfilm. We have over 1,000 genealogy files organized by family name in the collection, and these contain compiled research, newspaper articles, obituaries, all within that file that you can look through. We also have completed family histories in the reference library and a large collection of photos indexed by surname. We have baptism, marriage, and burial records for some of the local churches, as well as church histories. And these are interesting because they will give a history on the community, but also will provide photos of parishioners and their families. For cemetery records, we have indexed transcriptions of grave markers in the local cemeteries. And again, we have to thank the Ontario ancestors who put a lot of these together. And if you're interested in learning where your ancestors resided, we have quite a bit of resources here. There are a few that I just want to point out. So we have completed property research binders, and each property is sorted by address. And those include a timeline of the history of the property, including property ownership, information about occupants, and if we know when a house was built, that sort of thing. But we've also indexed those according to surname. And so if you can see the index card here, if you were coming in looking for information about Richard Dowler, we have a card that shows he was associated with lot 59 in Malden, and that we have research completed for 7143 County Road 50. Another great resource is Doris Gaspar's property study. She did a large property study of the downtown core, and that covers the history up to 1913. So there's a lot of information about early Amherstburg families in that document. We're working on putting a lot more of our collection online, but we do have several resources available on our website now. One resource I wanted to point out is the Upsetting the Hourglass indexes. So Upsetting the Hourglass was a column in the Amherstburg Echo that pulled events and items of interest published in the newspaper over time. And we've gone and indexed that information from the column. So for example, if you pulled up one of the indexes and you were looking for information about Ed Affleck, you could see that there was a piece published in Upsetting the Hourglass on April 1st, 1987. The information was pulled from the newspaper in 1947, and Ed Affleck's cow had to be dug out of a haystack after a storm. So you get a lot of little tidbits of information from these indexes. Speaking of online resources, I just wanted to mention that David Hutchinson with the Essex branch scanned our yearbook collection, and those are now available online through SWOTA publications. One of the areas of settlement that we've done some research into in recent years is McGregor. We have put together a series of 4 books called McGregor News, which is a reprinting of columns from the Amherstburg Echo, and they cover the years 1875 to 1925. Each of those books has an index of surnames. This is not an exhaustive list, but it shows some of the names that appear in the newspaper quite a bit in the McGregor news column. And we have family files for a lot of the names you see here. And finally, some other resources for McGregor researches that we have are the St. Clement's Church records, the cemetery transcriptions. We have birth, marriage, and death indexes from the Echo, land records, maps, etc. And I will now turn the presentation over to Nancy Brown, who will give us some more history on McGregor.
Good evening to everyone out there. I am excited.
Sorry, Nancy, you're muted on your computer. You just, if you can unmute in the bottom left-hand corner.
Try now.
That's better.
Okay. A second chance here. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to your screen. I'm excited to have a second opportunity to share the history of the village of McGregor during the time of 1875 to the turn of the century in 1900, but this time in a virtual way. Now, 20 of the 30 plus years that I was working with the Essex County Library, 20 of which were at the McGregor branch, starting in 1979. So it was there that I not only was the librarian, but also a good listener. I had the privilege of hearing many stories from the elder demographic of the village who grew up in the area. Well, this sparked my interest in the local history of the area and how it came to be the vibrant and busy village it was in the good old days. Today, we as people living in different times and circumstances we never would have dreamed of can refer to our own good old days, which was just 1 year ago. But first of all, I'd like to share some news that reveals that today we share something in common with the village in 1875. Facebook. Facebook was available in 1875 in its own way, not just in the 20th century, but back then Facebook had a different name, the McGregor News, a weekly column in the Amherstburg Echo that could tell you everything you wanted to know about your neighbors, friends, and family, and all the busyness going on in the village. The author of these columns from the Echo is unknown and remains so. Information was possibly gathered while attending one of the many large social gatherings at the homes of the residents. I am quite envious. In spite of their hardships, those were the really good old days for the original pioneers. Excuse me. Legally, McGregor was labeled as a hamlet, but was always referred to as a village. McGregor is one of the unique communities in Essex County that is divided into two separate municipalities, with the former Colchester Township along the current Walker Road, which was the dividing line. The Colchester Township was amalgamated in 1999 with the town of Essex, and the former Anderton Township, which amalgamated in 1998 with the town of Amherstburg. Now, my presentation is broken down into categories. So I will give you the titles of those as we reach them, and hopefully I will stay on track. So the first category is the Anderton Reserve. where the first recorded residents were. Before 1875, former township of Anderton was occupied by the Wyandot native tribe. Not many of the tribes remained on the reserve. Most left to live on reserves in other parts of Ontario and the US to join together with other native bands. Those that stayed lived in the areas of concession 6, 7, and 8, which was divided into 3 blocks, A, B, and C. Block B remained a reserve for the Wyandots, who eventually petitioned for the ability to sell off the land that they occupied in their area in 1873. Sales of this desirable Crown-owned land, being waterfront property, was bought up quickly. People from various areas of Canada and the US arrived at the long-awaited auction in hopes of securing this virgin wooded land with plans to resell farmland to new settlers or acquire farmland for themselves. The most enticing draw being timber. 2,700 acres of white oak, balm, hickory, ash, and elm, some of the tallest trees in southern Ontario that would eventually be rail cars, dwellings, and whiskey barrels. In attendance and an overseer of purchases was William McGregor, Member of Parliament from Amherstburg for the riding of South Essex, representing the Liberal Party, and the future namesake of the McGregor Post Office, formerly known as Colchester Crossing, where a mailbag was thrown off of the train. At this point, the Canadian Southern Railway has been extended to Amherstburg and had a significant contribution to the future of the village. Also in attendance at the auction were dignitaries representing the Department of Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior, who represented the Wyandot natives in the sale of the reserve area along Walker Road, the beginning of a future thriving community. The plots of land totaling 2,700 acres sold rapidly at an average cost of $17 an acre at 6% interest, the proceeds of which were shared among the members of the tribe. By giving up their land, they now had entitlement to citizenship and voting rights. By 1875, the 2,700 acres, which included concessions 6, 7, and 8, were sold to eager future landowners. One of the more prolific purchases was by Thomas Adair, Reeve of Southampton, Bruce County, before coming to the McGregor area, whose vision was to sell lots to new settlers, build up a village that would include a steam sawmill, a grist mill, and a post office to serve a future community. At the auction, he purchased 93.5 acres and quickly divided some of this property into individual residential lots on Walker Road. The village started to grow. He was also the first proprietor to have erected a general store. Not far behind him was the up-and-coming lumber baron of Essex County, Thomas Willett. Originally from the Anderton area, later to build a large home on the riverfront in Amherstburg that still stands today. With having 800,000 felled trees and orders coming fast and furious from buyers as far as Buffalo, New York. High on the list was Hiram Walker of Walkerville, distiller of whiskey. He started clearing a part of his timber groves of 800 acres in Colchester North to prepare for building a 3.5-mile wooden and steel tramway that led to the McGregor CSR station to the Walkerville distillery. The cutting went on day and night to keep up with the orders and only stopped when the marsh-like and mucky landscape made it impossible to remove the lumber safely, in fear of losing either men or draw horses or both. The wet weather also resulted in sawmill owners raising their mills up onto stilts to keep their lumber and equipment dry. Over the years, the sawdust that was accumulated on the ground helped in drying up those mushy areas and made the land more acceptable for building future homes. Lumbering was a very hard physical work at any time here, but fortunately, during very frigid winters after trees had been felled, it was much easier to haul logs on top of frozen ground. It also was the beginning of a village that was quickly popping up in a frenzy, because during this time of growth, it could be compared to a gold rush. Timber was their gold and in high demand. Many strong, healthy young men flocked there to obtain positions as cutters or haulers. A boarding house was soon built by Mr. Willett for his team of workers to board at to avoid traveling when cutting was at its peaks. Soon others followed Willett's dream. David Sicklesteel of Kent County, later to settle in Amherstburg, erected his large sawmill on the Colchester side of the road, where logs were processed for shipping out by rail cars. Through the 23 years in business, he continually made improvements and additions to his mill. He also had business ventures in the US and eventually partnered with Thomas Willett, two very ambitious young men. Louis Arquette, a local landowner, purchased property on the Colchester side next to the CSR and generously deeded a portion to Sicklesteel for his large sawmill, and also subdivided his remaining property on Walker Road for residential use. When lumber supplies diminished by 1896, Sicklesteel sold his McGregor sawmill to George Niebergall, a carpenter and lumberman from Goderich who manufactured staves and hoops for Hiram Walker barrels made from the lumber products. Niebergall also took over the operation of another sawmill at Camp Palmer, located off of South Malden Road. At this point in time, with the success of the sawmills, the village area was progressing rapidly. The village now had a post office since 1876, and a new official name was given to the previous Colchester crossing to McGregor, named after William McGregor, who was not only a member of Parliament for South Essex, representing the Liberal Party, but a well-respected businessman in Windsor, as Reeve of Windsor and Warden of Essex County. Ironically, McGregor, a Scottish name, was chosen for a predominantly French-Canadian population. But what a fine man behind the name McGregor. The population at this point was around 250. There were many itinerant new settlers bringing their families to the community to live, while there was the high demand for lumber and workers and entrepreneurs setting up shop to meet the needs of the area. Many descendants of original families stayed in the area to this day. Some familiar names from the late 1800s still exist in the village and surrounding area, such as Willett, Pilon, Riom, Grandin, Meloche, Gagnon, Galipeau, Gignac, Paquette, Droulard, Coyle, and Renault, just to name a few. Now, the next category is going to be on hotels and businesses. The village was prospering upon the arrival of John Thrasher, who was a local hotelier in Essex County and who was one of the many movers and shakers of the village. He recognized the necessity of a meeting place for loggers to congregate and to provide a resting place for the many travelers that used the Walker Path from Windsor to Kingsville, originating in 1876. After the construction of this commodious structure, the McGregor House Tavern was paid a visit by an inspiring politician, Premier Wilfrid Laurier, who made a grand speech in October 1900 to a large group of McGregorites, I should say, from the balcony of the hotel during his tour of Essex County. He was well received with much applause and cheering. For 9 years, Thrasher, who was the proprietor of the hotel, he sold it to a new owner, J.A. Aubin, who ran a successful business there for over 20 years before moving to Windsor as a realtor. Aubin House was unfortunately a victim of the first major fire in 1891, which also destroyed a good part of the village located near the CSR railroad tracks. It was presumed that hot coals from the train's engine were the cause. In spite of the setback, Mr. Aubin made great efforts to rebuild and had his facility up and running again within less than a year, but soon put it up for sale. 6 years go by and no takers. He had improvements made while Mr. Aubin pursued an additional career in real estate in the village. Finally, a buyer came forward, Felix Melage, only to sell it back to Aubin. Many new owners followed, keeping the hotel business intact continuously to the present day. Always a stable commodity, except during Prohibition or a pandemic. A second hotel was erected by Joseph Dauphin in 1890, also on the Anderton side with the name McGregor House Tavern. He also added a space for a bar and a liquor room. His hotel closed within 2 years of the grand opening, most likely due to the damage from the fire in 1891. Well, many an elbow was bent in celebration in these establishments that oftentimes ended the evening with a bang-up fist fight and unfortunately the occasional tragedy. A good reason to have at least one doctor and a constable in the area. Now, Dr. David Bichard set up office in a small structure which was well stocked with medical needs. Prior to his settling in McGregor, doctors from Essex and Amherstburg tended to the many workers with the dismembered digits, and etc., and the many injuries suffered from the handling of livestock and horses. Sadly, diseases that are treatable today took the lives of many adults and young children, contracting diseases such as typhoid fever, smallpox, tuberculosis, and women given birth at that time. How lucky and blessed we are with our scientists of today. Next category is about other essential businesses. It was quite evident at the time that horses and buggies were one of the main resources of transportation. A young, ambitious blacksmith, Charles Richardson of Colchester South, set up the first large blacksmithing business and carriage shop, where he served the community for 5 years and sold to Mr. Sicklesteel. With the growing number of people moving into the village, an additional general store was constructed by the proprietor, William Twomey, who had first-class goods of all classes, as was advertised in the McGregor News. Within a year, he added a meat shop because most farmers had livestock. The following year, he sold his business to the new proprietors, Sickle Steel, and Twomey's son-in-law, Fred Reeve. Within 3 years, the business was for sale again and sold back to William Twomey. So there was a lot of action going on as far as selling their place, trying out a new business, and there were other businesses also. So I have a list here of the many different people that came to the village, and they didn't all come all at the same time. This is between the 25-year period, and some came for a year or two, left, went to other places where there was more population, more money. So I'm going to quickly run down this and just give you the specific things that they were known for. So there were butchers, there were meat markets, there was a harness shop, there was a shoemaker, barbers, at least 4 or 5 general stores, 1 doctor, 3 grocery stores, blacksmiths, 4 or 5, farm implement dealer, carpenter, hoop factory, a stave factory, a wagon maker, sawmills, grist mills, spoke factory, flour mill, lawyer, tailor, cabinet maker, real estate agent, grain merchant, and an ashery, which I found out that they use that for fertilizer that was sold to the farmers. So lots of action going on in a fairly small place. So the next category is on roads, railways, and other means of transportation. Before concessions were part of local geography, the original access to McGregor was a dirt road cut through thick brush leading from Walkerville to Colchester and Harrow for the purpose of obtaining and delivering grain and corn for the distillery and hay for Mr. Walker's livestock. This pathway, named Walker Road, was their highway with lots of activity, but not very passable or time-saving. Wet weather made it an arduous task for horses pulling heavy wagon loads. It was eventually spread and graded with gravel, which speeded up the delivery of goods. So the CSR started in 1873 and ran from Buffalo to Detroit with a terminus that went through Essex and McGregor to the Gordon station in the former Anderton in 1888, located where the General Chemical stood. This railway line was integral to the financial growth of the village, now that the sawed timber could be transported to the US. It also provided a faster way for residents of the village to travel to Essex and to transfer to the rail line into Windsor. Their world was expanding. The CSR also extended to the town of St. Thomas, Ontario, and offered 4 different pickup times per station per day. Now that's what you call good local transportation. 10 years later, the CSR was leased to the MCR, the Michigan Central Railway. As the demand for whiskey grew, Hiram Walker wanted to receive his lumber orders in a more timely manner. And to do this, he had a new railway constructed in 1888 that started at his distillery, the end of the line at Kingsville. This was financed independently by Hiram Walker himself. And it went by the name of the Lake Erie, Essex, and Detroit River Railway, or the LEE and DR, and crossed the MCR at the McGregor station, which was later leased to the Pere Marquette Railway in 1903. This railway is now the Chrysler Greenway Way Trail and is enjoyed by many people of the village and surrounding areas since its inception in 1997. Now, my next category is about the local social activities and clubs. The construction of the original St. Clement's Roman Catholic Church had started, and that also resulted in many fundraising picnics. The St. Clement's Church, along with the St. John the Baptist Society Men's Group, also held popular annual fundraising picnics in a large nearby grove with an attendance anywhere from 300 to 2,000 people. Over the years, other towns made their way to the open grove, numbering up to 5,000 people, all being fed by the women. How did they prepare for these events? Bad weather was their enemy while making the preparations when the grove was turned into a marshland due to rain. A gold watch was frequently the prize at Perch events, given to the person who sold the most tickets, one for the man that won and one for a woman. Along with this was always a feast of oysters. I found out that the oysters came from Detroit when they were packed in ice and probably were brought across the river somewhere from Amherstburg from the US. There was also always entertainment by local concert bands and always a stump speech from local politicians and dignitaries who never missed a church picnic. Although the local men and women worked at hard laboring jobs, there was always energy enough to go to one of the many dances being held in private homes in the village during the week. Many get-togethers went on into the wee hours that either started or ended with a game of Traveling Pedro, a bridge-like game before euchre dominated the locals' leisure time. A croquet field was put aside by Mr. Willett for the villagers to use when not participating in baseball competitions. Other games of sport were friendly ball shooting matches where a sparkling glass ball was tossed into the air only to be shattered by a sharp shooter. There was a serious competition then between McGregor and Amherstburg players that went on for years. The village had its cultural attributes and activities that McGregorites took part in, such as the McGregor Cornet Band, who played at all picnics and concerts, even serenading newcomers while transferring their personal items from the train to their new homes. The first welcome wagon, I would imagine. Music at dances was a staple ingredient for an enjoyable evening with friends and neighbors. The church choir with soloists were present at every religious event and fundraiser. All were parishioners. Villagers had a place to share their opinions at the debating society and held their meetings at the local SS number 8 school, located at the present site of the Knights of Columbus Hall. Up to 70 people would attend to discuss which language was more useful to their community, French or English. Single men could join another club, the Bachelors Club of McGregor. If one was to marry, they were then referred to as someone who will resign his bachelor life and join the army of Benedicts. In 1895, the McGregor Council of Chosen Friends, men, start a branch of the Council of the Canadian Order of Chosen Friends and start to hold regular weekly meetings. This organization revolved around acquiring sick benefits for workers. There was also a Knights of Labor, an organization in Canada for the betterment of working conditions, which hopefully would result in less major injuries in the logging business. In 1889, the St. Jean-Baptiste Society of McGregor has assembled and had a grand celebration in a local forest grove where 3,000 members of French Canadians from McGregor and surrounding communities gathered together to defend their Roman Catholic religion and their language, French. The non-French population had difficulty with their language, while the French-speaking parents were encouraging their children to embrace their French heritage along with the English language. This caused unrest amongst the villagers. Politicians that were present at the time spoke out on behalf of the French Canadians that day, which calmed the crowd. This helped immensely for the assimilation of the two cultures, and peace was now upon the village. Another large celebration of St. Jean-Baptiste Day took place in 1895, including members of other branches and members of the St. Anne Society. French Canadians continued to exercise their united spirit and demands for respect regarding language, religion, and education. The women of the groups were acknowledged for their support. Music was the usual competition for a gold watch took place. The Ladies of the Altar Society was another church-related group specifically for the women of the parish. Nice. This next category is the fear of fires. The first significant fire of 1881 destroyed most of the village buildings in McGregor due to their proximity to the railroad tracks. Trains were fueled with coal, and hot coals sparked fires. Following the 81 fire was in 1890, where one of the first grocery stores, the outer buildings, along with Mr. Willette's nearby rented home, were turned into ashes. A year later, the current general store, barn, the residence, sawmills, gristmill, horse stables, 2 granaries, including the Aubin Host Hotel, were destroyed. The entire west side of the village was in flames. The fire was still raging. No volunteer fire department in villages. Amherstburg offered help, but due to drought the past 2 years, water supply was low and the railway was blocked and not passable. McGregorites had to fend for themselves with the bucket brigade with little success. McGregors survived these fires in spite of more fires and natural disasters to come in the 20th century. During these 2 consecutive years, with very little rain, villagers would line up with empty pails waiting for the MCR while on their stop, hoping to get water to drink and to bathe with from the engine. Drilling for water began to help bring some relief, but drilling no less than 162 feet down after a long-awaited solution. McGregor was threatened again with fire in 1895 on the eastern side of Colchester North between Edgar Mills, McGregor, and Camp Palmer, all 3 areas having active lumber mills. 3 MCR rail cars were sent to McGregor to rescue villagers in the possibility of the fire spreading and the McGregor station to burn. Disaster was averted by a crew of 25 men from Windsor that headed to McGregor. Fires continued to burn in other parts of the county, but unfortunately, trains could not reach all of them due to the warped rails from extreme heat. No fatalities were recorded. The next part here is places of worship. Protestant services were started at Thrasher Hotel and were well attended. A Methodist mission house was also holding meetings in an unknown local hall. Both groups left the area, and no permanent Protestant church was ever established in the area of McGregor since those times. Because of a growing French, Canadian, Roman Catholic population, Father Jean-Pierre Grand from Amherstburg was sent to McGregor to oversee the construction of the wood frame building, the original church, in the north corner of the present-day parking lot of St. Clement's in 1879. It was finished in 1880 with seating for 200. There were fundraising events for the original St. Clement's Roman Catholic Church held at the schoolhouse, SS number 8. As the population grew, the original fundraising picnics started and were moved to large local groves with large attendance. Lawn socials were also held during warmer weather and added to the monies raised. After the completion and dedication, the newly built church in 1880, Father Grand leaves the area after only 6 months. He is needed at other struggling churches and is replaced by Father Schneider from Amherstburg, who stays for 8 years and is later replaced by Father Alfred Bayshard of Stony Point. And my almost last section, yes, it is the last section, is on schools. In 1879, the first school was initiated by John Thrasher, the hotelier, who made an application for a school under the name of Union School, Anderton Section number 8, and Colchester Township, School Section number 20. That's a long name for a school, for both Catholic and Protestant students, located at the KFC Hall, and became referred to as the Public Union School, much easier to say. Before being hired, female teachers had to be registered, single, and with a salary of $430 a year. 5 years later, the school building burnt down and classes were moved to a temporary building, one of Mr. Sickle Steele's homes, but unfortunately only to be destroyed by fire. A new schoolhouse was erected within 8 months on the original property. Non-resident students who wished to attend the Union School were required to pay $5 a month. Average attendance was 81. There were new teachers, assistant teachers, principals, and trustees that changed often. The number of non-Catholic trustees were being outnumbered by French-Canadian trustees. Therefore, more French-speaking teachers were hired and were teaching Catholic prayers and catechism long before the school became a separate school. St. Ursula came along later in 1914 due to the fact that there were very few Protestant students at that time. So this is the end of my presentation, except for one little tidbit that showed up in the McGregor News. And I think you'll enjoy this short story. I'm going to keep it short because I'm running out of voice here. It's the huge snake story. It's about a little girl, 7 years old, that she went wandering in the woods, not too far from the village, when a large snake made its appearance. And as she ran towards her mother, who was some distance off, a reptile followed fast after her. As she got to her mother, she got on a fallen tree, and her mother ran towards her, seeing that the snake, with its head erect in front of the child, threw a big limb of a tree at it, at which time the reptile twined itself around it and then rapidly crawled off into the forest. In the meantime, the child had fallen to the ground in convulsions from the fright and was carried home by her mother, but died the same evening. Well, the mother described the snake as being about 15 feet long and several inches thick about the body, with bluish black and yellow stripes and having 2 horns. It is said that the dead body of the girl was spotted with the colors of the snake. Well, so far, there has not been any new sightings. Thank goodness. And the end. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, I'll pass that on to Meg. Or if
Hi, it's actually Linda here, Linda Urquhart. I just wanted to say that was wonderful, Meg and Nancy. It's great to learn so much about the Marsh collection and what it offers us, and as well to learn so much about McGregor's early history in Essex County. I'm not sure we have any questions yet. Has anybody put anything into the chat box? Okay, there is one question here. Are there any remains of all those buildings that burnt down?
The hotel, the original hotel is still there. It's over, well, it's got to be, about 150 years old. Yeah. It's still, the only difference in it visually is that that balcony that the premier spoke from is not there. If you remember the photo that it showed, it was quite a nice looking place, but it didn't have any fires in the during my generation. So, but it always did need 1876 was when it was built. That's right.
So is that building still standing?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
It's had many renovations. Yes, and there was a time, like the 20 years of my 30 plus years as working with the library, I spent 17 years where the library was right next door to the hotel. There were some exciting days there. Nights too. Fights. Yeah, so there are homes. I'm trying to think. Well, the church, of course, is still there, since the current church that was built in 1903 is still there, and it's one of well, it's pretty majestic as far as we're concerned. We got to keep all of our statues when in the 60s, the diocese wanted everyone to get rid of your statues. They wanted a modern look. Well, there was a group of people from St. Clements that fought the diocese, fought in the way of, through meetings and that, and we got to keep them. And so when people not from the area come to that church, they are amazed. And the people who were working on the pointing of the bricks came from the Amherstburg quarry. So over the years, the mortar in between the bricks was crumbling away, and he made a statement that he compared our church to those from Europe that are 300 to 400 years old.
Wow.
That makes us want to keep it up and hope it can stay another 100 years. So
There's another question here from Margaret McCreary. She wants to know exactly where was Camp Palmer, and do you know anything about this village's history that you can share?
Camp Palmer was one of those places, just like McGregor started out, a stop where the train would throw off the mail. And if it's on South Malden Road, and there's nothing there that says that it was Camp Palmer, that was just one of the sawmills that all the sawmills, once the trees were cut down, they were gone. And I can't tell you if there was a settlement there or not. There probably was temporary, maybe dwellings, but I have never seen, I haven't seen any indication of it. So it was probably named after a Mr. Palmer. But
Right.
And Edgar's was the same thing. Edgar's was another train stop, but it had a grocery store. Oh, and people built homes there. But anyone that grew up in the area since the 50s, they still call it Edgar's. You can find it on an old map. If you get your hands on one of the 1881 maps that the libraries carry, it shows every little place where the train stopped that had, and each one of them had a post office. So
Yes, Cindy Robichaud said that the visuals were fantastic, especially the maps, and she's thanking you both very much. And this question is probably for Meg. Cindy was wondering, are there any fees for lookups? Can't hear you, Meg.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
So if you're looking for property research that we haven't completed before, the charge is $30. And then for other research, genealogy, if it's something we can look up within an hour, there's no charge. And then if it's going to be beyond that, then we'll discuss what the fee would be before that. Especially right now, since we can't let the public in to access the materials on their own, we're doing quite a bit more lookups and sending information by email.
Okay, Elaine Buckstein wrote, hello, thank you for the presentation. She wanted to thank me for helping her find an article in the Echo from September the 16th, 1881, about the drowning of her great-grandfather, Dennis Reeve. So wonderful to finally learn what happened to him at the age of 32, leaving 6 children. Only mystery left is what the men were moving out to a schooner heading for Hamilton when a storm arose. Interesting, this happened the day after the fire described tonight. Thank you again. I think the schooner was leaving, going on Lake Erie from either Leamington or Kingsville or somewhere around there. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly, but and they were loading something, maybe lumber, I don't know, onto this bigger boat, and the storm came up so quickly, and the captain of the ship would not let the men that were taking this material out to the boat. They wouldn't let them on the boat for safety. They told them to go back to shore, and on the way back to shore, they were capsized and Dennis Ream was one of the ones that died. It's interesting. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions. We've really gone beyond our time anyway, so they can always get a hold of you. They could probably get a hold of Nancy through Meg.
Yes.
And that information is in the handout. Again, on behalf of the Essex branch of Ontario Ancestors, I want to thank Meg and Nancy for giving this presentation for our members and for all others watching tonight. So Meg, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Sure. I just have a little quote here. If at first you don't succeed, search again. That is why we call it research.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that wraps it up for tonight. We hope to see you all again in April, and bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.